Congratulations on still being here to watch Flute Tube, even though it's summer. Obviously what that means is that you are one of the most dedicated flute players out there. But on the downside, if you just come leave a view with no other trace of yourself, nobody will know who you are. So leave a comment or a like or a subscription so that we know who is out there being really dedicated this summer, and especially my own students. Don't you want your teacher to know that you're still out there paying attention and working on your flute? I think you should let me know that you're out there. I've had a couple of requests for musician stretches, and they really are important because when we practice for a long time, we do just get too tight, tense, or stiff, and we need to take some time to relax the muscles that we're using when we practice. It's very important to do in any longer practice session that's, say, over an hour, but I never time when I should be doing stretches. Just as soon as I start to feel some accumulated tension, I put my flute down and I do a few stretches to make sure that I'm relaxing and relieving the tension that's built up. One reason I haven't done this episode yet is that I don't really have a method of stretching, so I don't have any proven scientific set of stretches to give you, but I do them often. They are very important. So I've accumulated all of these exercises over the years from the time that I first started playing the flute up through my current schedule, teaching and performing and doing practicing sessions. But I do have to give a huge shout out to my old teacher from Juilliard, Wincenc, because when I went to her, I got so many more stretches than I'd ever had before. She was great for that. And at the time I thought, how serendipitous, here I am in New York, where I feel more tense than I've ever felt in my life before, and I'm getting these stretches at the same time so I can get rid of that tension. But it did occur to me at the same time that might be part of why Wincenc is so great at this, because she lives in New York. She has this incredibly high energy, intense lifestyle that involves a lot of stress, and she stretches all the time. I know she stretches before she practices, while she practices, as I do as well. So here we go. I'm just going to give you my favorite stretches, and a lot of these target the spine because usually I practice standing up. I can breathe better that way. I can use my air better. If I'm getting ready for a solo with an orchestra or a big concert with a chamber group, I will start to sit when I practice before the concert so that the breathing will be the same as it will be in the concert when I'll be sitting. But especially when you stand, as well as when you sit, we get a lot of accumulated tension in our spine. So the exercises that help me the most when I'm practicing are to lengthen and stretch my spine. The first one that I do all the time in a typical practice session, if you were spying on my practice, you'd see me do this multiple times for sure, is called the ragdoll exercise. This is a time-honored exercise that I've done my whole flute life. So when you do this exercise, you want to think of just allowing gravity to pull your torso down towards your legs. Let it pull you forward. It's good if you exhale as you go down. And then I let my arms hang since I've been using them a lot and I want to relieve tension in my arms. And I want to feel my back releasing all its tension as I go down so that I'm just hanging limply like a rag doll. Once you get to the bottom, you want to hold it there for a minute and just breathe and feel all of the tension leaving your body. And then as you come up, let your arms and your shoulders just hang. And you want to roll up on your spine, just one vertebra at a time, so that it takes you a long time to come back up. Keep your head and your shoulders down to the very end, and just when you get to that point in your spine, when you reach that vertebra that's like kind of the beginning of your neck, then let your neck come up and let your shoulders expand out. Another of my very favorite exercises that I do for my spine, I don't know if it has a more formal name, but I just call it reach for the ceiling. And the point is, you have to really, truly reach for the ceiling. You can't do this in a place where the ceilings are low because they have to be out of your reach. But you have to stretch as hard as you can with one arm and then your other arm. And really, you have to tell yourself, I'm going to reach the ceiling. Because that makes you get up on the tips of your toes. It makes you stretch all the way through your fingertips. And I love how oxygenated this exercise makes me feel, especially my brain. I feel wide awake every time that I do this exercise. And often if I'm a guest for a flute society and I do a warm-ups class, I'll tell students to reach for the ceiling and I'll offer them $100. If anybody gets the ceiling, I'll give them a $100 bill so that they'll be really motivated to stretch as hard as they can. Another very simple exercise that's great is to lie down on the floor and just release all your tension. Lie kind of flat on the floor, or you can bend your knees up if that feels better, but you want to feel your weight just sinking through the ground down to the center of the earth. Let gravity take over. This gave me an epiphany once when I was at a lesson at Juilliard. I was playing the Lieberman second movement, which even if I'm just listening to it, always makes me feel tense. It's just the energy of the piece. And I was playing it and I was at Carol Wincenc's apartment and she said, "You just look so tense." And I said, "I am." And she said, "Okay, put your flute down." She had me lie down on the floor. She said, "We don't have time to do this full exercise where you go through and you release tension from each and every muscle, but you can do a 1-minute version of this where you just think of relaxing everything all at once, let gravity take over." And I did that for about a minute in her apartment. I stood up, I picked up my flute, I kept playing Lieberman second movement, and it was a stunning difference. I felt completely physically different. So if you find yourself accumulating a lot of tension, especially if it's in a high tension piece like that, it's really good to just set your flute down, don't battle the tension, release all that tension, and then stand up and play it again. Another of my favorites is to swing my arms. Breathe in through your nose as you raise your arms and out through your mouth as you lower them. You want to keep your spine elongated and stretched. You want to keep your knees bent and your weight over your toes. And then you half close your eyes. This is great to do backstage before a concert. You don't want to be sitting still because you'll have to stand up and your heart rate will go up just before you go out on stage and need to control your breathing. This keeps you relaxed but moving while you're backstage. And it keeps the oxygen coming into your body and your muscles. Then you can just walk straight out on the stage. Your heart rate won't suddenly go up because your body will already have been moving. There's a great variant to this, and I believe Carol Wincenc created this variant. This you want to do the same thing, but with your flute in your hands. First, your hands should be in the same position as they were before, just palms towards the ground. But then you want to turn your left hand around so that it's more closely approximating what your arms actually do when you hold a flute. This really helps you realize how light your flute is. Depending on the metal or the wood that your flute is made of, it's going to be roughly 1 pound, maybe 1.5 pounds. So after doing this exercise, you'll feel that the weight of the flute is nothing compared to the weight of your own body. So you can do this exercise and then put your flute up to your face. Don't move your body to your flute. Bring the flute to you. We tend to kind of crouch around our flutes as though they weighed 100 pounds, but they're very light. So just bring the flute to you. Feel how light your flute is. And this should help relieve a lot of tension because suddenly the flute feels like such a small thing to be holding. There are a couple more great arm exercises that I got from Carol Wincenc. One, she always just said 1, 2, 3, swing, but it can really relieve tension from your shoulders. And another great arm exercise is just to hold your arms out and roll your wrists back and forth. This one, Carol told me that when she had a baby and she was both practicing a lot and carrying a little baby around all the time, she was in real danger of tendinitis, and she was given this exercise as a way to put the energy in your large, powerful muscles and release tension from your tendons and your small muscles. And she said it really saved her a lot of wrist trouble at that point in her life where her wrist and her fingers were doing a lot of work all the time. I'm going to just give you a few last exercises here, and you've probably come across these, if not in music, at some other point in your life when you've been doing exercises. One is just to roll your head back and forth on your neck, forwards and backwards carefully. Another is pelvic rolls. These again target your spine just in very specific locations where we might be holding tension. Carol always does this in classes. People feel a little awkward, but it's really good for your lower spine. There are also good finger stretches which musicians can really benefit from. One very basic one is just to spread your fingers wide so that you relieve tension. You can do a fist first if you want, but it's most important to stretch in the opposite direction that you've been using. So since we're always pushing and kind of making a fist, you want to stretch the opposite way. You can also put your palm down on a flat surface like a table and just straighten your fingers out and flatten your hand down towards your palm, down towards that surface. And then you can also lift your fingers up from that surface, either one at a time or all together. A lot of musicians work with a little hand therapy ball to have something to squeeze and strengthen. You can also work with clay if you'd rather. And another very targeted place that you might want to stretch, especially if you're a flutist or another wind player, is your face. So Carol would have us do this thing where you tighten everything, just tighten your face up as much as you possibly can, and then release it all. Everything wide, eyes wide open, your mouth wide open, and tighten again, tighten everything up, and then release. And that helps to relieve any tension you've been building in your cheeks or in your jaw, or even around your eyes and your eyebrows. Some flute players tend to use their eyebrows a lot when they play. As I mentioned before, this is not intended to be an exhaustive list of stretches and exercises for musicians, but it's a great place to start. And most musicians will have a set of favorites. So if you have a favorite that I haven't mentioned here, please leave it in the comments. And one last word. Since musicians are athletes of the small muscles, and we often spend hours a day working with these little muscles, we also need to be sure that we're using our big muscles. So I mentioned way back in episode 1 that as musicians you need to do exercise, and especially flute players need to do aerobic exercise because you need to get used to breathing deeply, especially when your heart rate is up. But also weights can help a lot, and I have friends who've told me that they have battled tendinitis really successfully by lifting weights, because again, it strengthens your big muscles and it takes some pressure off of your little muscles. So to end this episode, be sure that you don't just think about stretches that you can do before or while you practice. Be sure you think about how you're using your body all the time. You want to develop just generally good, healthy physical habits, because of course, all of these habits will see you through years and years of practicing for hours and hours every single day.